Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome on a not very warm evening. So the first thing is congratulations to you all for braving the weather to be here this evening for this very special public hustings in the run-up to our general election. Welcome also to those of you who may be joining us online from the warmth, comfort and accessible coffee in your own homes. We hope that you also are able to participate in this evening's event. And most of all, a very warm welcome to all of our candidates who have fitted this into their very busy, hectic schedules in the run-up to voting day. We're immensely grateful to all of you for taking time to come here to address the public's questions and to give people a sense of who you are and try perhaps to win their votes. So one or two just practical matters before we start. The first is that in the unlikely event that we need to exit the building very quickly, there will be two exits. One, the main doors you came in through, and secondly, that door over on that side that will be open should we need to exit that way. Then also on practical note, if anyone should need access to a loo, there are loos available for use both at the library, which is at the far east end of the high street, and at the museum/community office, which is about halfway down the high street. So those are the two loos that are available should anyone need to. The format that this evening will take is that each candidate will in turn give an opening statement, which they'll do from the lectern just in front of me here, and they will do so in an order that has been selected by lot. And they will have 2 minutes each to give their opening statement. After that, we move into questions. There will be two different series of questions. The first are some questions that have been pre-submitted in writing, and the candidates received those questions about 15 minutes ago. So they've had 15 minutes or so to consider those questions. Those questions will be answered again in an order that has been selected by lot. Then the second phase of questions will be questions from the floor. So we will invite anyone who would like to indicate that they would like to raise a question by raising an arm, and then I will choose who is going to ask the questions. And I'm very grateful to two students from King's School Bruton who will bring you a microphone if you are selected, and then you can put your question, which will be, please, a question to all of the candidates. So each candidate will answer each question, and again, you've guessed it, in an order that has been selected by lot. The last phase will be a short closing statement that each candidate will give, again in a random order, from the lectern in front, and that will be 1 minute. So that's the format: 4 distinct phases, an opening statement, 2 rounds of questions, and a closing statement. And this is a public event. Anyone is welcome to attend. Anyone is welcome to ask a question, including those who submitted a written question which doesn't get put. We had a lot of questions submitted in writing, and I selected from them the 4 or 5 that we will actually use this evening. We had far too many to be able to use them all. So if you did submit a question in writing and it's not put, then do feel free to put that to put that question orally. And when we get to the oral questions, I will probably say this again at that time, I'm sure that you would agree that what we are most interested in this evening is the views, personalities, the characters of our parliamentary candidates. It's not to say that you're not important, you are, because you get to vote for them. But we are more interested in their views than your views. So questions need to be questions rather than long statements of your own opinion with a short question attached at the end, if that's all right, please. So bear that in mind when thinking of how to frame your question. And again, just to emphasise, the questions need to be for all of the candidates to address rather than one specific candidate or party. So those are the ground rules. I hope they're clear. And as I'm sure everyone who's comparing a public hustings says, what we welcome is good, robust, but courteous debate. And so I hope that you will all honour and respect that. People who put themselves up for public office expose themselves to the risk of all sorts of treatment by people, and I hope that here in Bruton we will maintain courtesy and civility as we ask what should be probing and difficult questions, but we do so with politeness, please. So, having said all that, it's my joy to welcome our parliamentary candidates. You can see we've colour-coded the name badges in front in case you're not familiar with everyone's face and the party that they represent. But at my right, your left, we have Faye Purbrick from the Conservative Party, then next to her, John Cousins from the Green Party, then on my left, your right, Hal Huberman from the Labour Party, Sarah Dyke from the Liberal Democrats, and then on the far end, Tom Carter from Reform UK. So those are our candidates, and would you please give them a big round of applause to welcome. And so to start our evening off, Hal Huberman from the Labour Party is going to give us his opening statement of 2 minutes, please, Hal.
I didn't trip over on that way down. I'll leave that for my speaking. Thank you all for coming. It feels funny to be at the front of St Mary's Church in Bruton, where I come from, with so many people I know. It feels like it could be my wedding or funeral. I love where I come from. I was born in Yeovil. I went to Bruton Primary and then Sexies. My first job was up the road in Alhampton, followed by working Bavins on the High Street. I know we deserve better from our government. I believe in the good that a Labour government can and will do for all of us here in Somerset, our families, friends and neighbours. After 13 years of the last Labour government, no one was in any doubt about the scale of what was achieved. This list is long, and I could keep you all in this lovely church all night. Millions of pensioners and children lifted out of poverty. Record high satisfaction levels in our NHS, paired with record low waiting lists, and the longest period of sustained economic growth in our history. Now, 14 years of the Conservatives. What do they have to show for that? Locally, we drive on pothole-ridden roads, we languish on NHS and dentistry waiting lists, whilst families are ripped apart by unaffordable housing. Do you feel better off now than you did 5 years ago, even 14 years ago? It is time for change. Labour's 5 missions for government lay the foundations for the genuine long-term rebuilding of Britain, not just some sticking plaster gimmicks designed for headlines. It's a fully funded and comprehensive plan for national renewal. Now, I'm not going to mislead you. Labour is not considered to be the primary challenger around here. However, Glastonbury and Somerton's a new constituency, an opportunity to start afresh. Vote how you want to. And if you want to be part of the new dawn of a Labour government, then vote Labour. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Tom Carter, and thanks for joining me on this lovely summer's evening. I live in Glastonbury. I've lived in Glastonbury now for all of my life, apart from a short stint in the army and at university. I've been here raising a family and teaching. I've got 3 boys, and for the first time this evening, my eldest boy is actually here, which is great. And I went to Crispin School as a boy and came back to teach there as a man. Now, why am I here? For me, it got to the point last autumn as I was driving around and I'd hit my 10th pothole of the day, and I thought to myself, what state is this country in as I hand it over to my boys? I think about my eldest, who's turning 16 in September, and the chance of him being able to go and buy a house. There's not enough affordable housing. We need to fast-track these brown site developments and start to look at new ways to build houses. They've got these amazing modular houses that are built off-site and put together like a Lego set, really cheap to heat, in some cases 50% of the cost. And at the point for me, of reform is it's a new way of looking at things. I'm not too worried about what's happened so far. To me, it's a line in the sand, and it's about finding a way forward with practical solutions. Now, I think about my son going to university, and to me, university, I think, has been missold to a generation. Because on the promise of the fact that you could go to university and come out with a much better paid job, the reality is that students are coming out with a degree that isn't really improving their life chances with £50,000 worth of debt. And unless you graduate with a £60,000 income, you won't keep up with the interest. So again, that's something that we would look to do, is to scrap the interest on student loans, just to give those people a chance to make headway with their loans. Now, going forward, the other most important thing for me is the cost of living, because I have such concern for the hardest working families in this country that are sometimes choosing as to whether they're going to heat their homes or put food on the table. So for me, to raise the tax threshold to £20,000 and also find a way to cut the energy bills by removing VAT and the renewable subsidies.
That's time up.
Okay, sorry, thank you.
Good evening. It was a summer working at Yeovilton where I first was inspired to dedicate my life to the service of this country. Sadly, injury put paid to that, but since then I found other ways to serve. As a hospital governor, a school governor, a charity trustee, and a town and county councillor. Now, my career path was forged over in Somerton, working for a small publishing company, where I learnt the base of skills that served me in my international career and my political career so far. But back then, when I wanted to grow my career and raise my family, the opportunities just did not exist here. So I left and I went to the Middle East, where I did thrive, but eventually the pull of home was strong. So I came back and started to pay back to the place and the people that have given me so much, working in my career in construction and engineering and serving as a local councillor. We create and grow so many amazing things here. Obviously the best cheese and cider in the world, but an amazing array of small businesses. But the most exceptional thing that we grow here is talent. And if I become your MP, one of my priorities will be to make sure that the talent that we grow here has the opportunity to thrive here. It's why I'm a Conservative, because I believe in creating opportunity and rewarding success. And that means the right incentives and investment in education and skills, our infrastructure and services, a light touch, small state government that empowers people and businesses to grow and supports the most vulnerable. The times we face now are some of the harshest that we've seen in my lifetime. I was in the Middle East during the Second Gulf War, and I know what risks we face and the broad scope of things that we will have to cope with over the coming years. And I've worked internationally, I have those skills, and I want to be your MP to make sure that you have the best representation in these uncertain times, somebody with a track record to deliver for all of you.
Hello everyone, it's lovely to be here in such a beautiful church. It's fantastic, I've just been really knocked out by the architecture and a beautiful place to see it. My name's John Cousins and I'm the Green Party candidate here in Glastonbury and Somerton. Brand new constituency, how exciting is that? I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm sure you'll find out lots about our policies and things like that as we go on. But I was born in Somerset and I grew up on a dairy farm. My first job was as a labourer. I remember reading a book during a break one day, and one of the fellow labourers said, "You can get paid for doing that in university," which was a very interesting thing to think about. And so I went to college, and I've ended up working in community for the last 30 years, community development, community regeneration. I've been a member of the Green Party since 1981. It was called the Ecology Party then. And it's something that is really important to me, and I think it's the key issue And it's probably the issue that is getting little amount of attention. The key issue is the ecological emergency and the climate emergency. And I've been at Glastonbury Town Council as a Green Town Councillor since 2011. In 2015, the Greens took Glastonbury Town Council from the Conservatives, one of my proudest achievements, and we've kept a majority there ever since. I've had the great honour of being Mayor of Glastonbury 4 times, and I've also been a District Councillor, Mendip District Council from 2019 to 23. And I have been involved in setting up a lot of community-run enterprises. I'm a big cooperator, so I've set up a community renewable energy company called Avalon Community Energy, which is a community benefit society. And I also set up, with a few other people, a wonderful community farm called Plot Gate Community Farm, Community Supported Agriculture Project in Barton St David. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. It's really nice to see such a packed church this evening. Now, it's been an absolute honour for me to represent my community as your MP for the last 10 months. This is my home. I live in a village just outside Wincanton called Cucklington, and I am a dairy farmer's daughter, and I've been living in this area. My family have been living in this area for over 250 years, when my great-grandfather, times 6, was born in North Cadbury in 1763. So when I speak to people on the doorsteps, I hear time and time again that our country is crying out for change. Under this Conservative government, everything is broken. You are playing by the rules, you're working hard, you're paying your taxes, but you have almost nothing to show for it, and you deserve a fair deal. Every day I speak to people who can't see a GP, can't find an NHS dentist, and can't get the help that they need to support an older relative. Our health and care services have been driven into the ground by the Conservatives, which is why we have pledged to provide 8,000 more GPs, giving you a guarantee of an appointment within 7 days and putting an end to the dental deserts. Under the Liberal Democrats, personal care would be free and based on need, not on ability to pay. Now, our fight for a fair deal where everyone can get the high-quality healthcare that they need, where we can take real action on the cost of living crisis, and where we safeguard our natural environment, an issue that I am particularly passionate about. So after years of Conservative chaos and neglect, let's take this opportunity to make change. Now, I hope you all know that I stand for hard work, honesty, and integrity, and I'm the strong local champion that this area needs. Thank you.
So we now come to the questions that have been pre-submitted in writing, which, as I said at the start, I have selected from amongst those questions. So I apologise to all those whose questions are not being put this evening, but they were all very good questions indeed. It was very difficult to make the choice between them. I will read the questions just in the interests of time, and then the candidates will have 1 minute each to give their answer, which they will give from their position here up at the table. So our first question this evening is about tax and public spending, and it's a question that's been submitted for us by Alistair Pearce. Alistair asks this: at a time when we all bemoan the state of public services, why is it that most politicians promise tax reductions which will certainly make them worse still? So that is Alistair's question, and the first person to answer that for us is John Cousins from the Green Party.
Well, thank you very much. It's a very important question. And I'm minded of a time when I went to the Somerset Association of Local Councils to see a speech being given by the Conservative head of Somerset County Council. And at the end of his speech, I put my hand up and I said, "You're not increasing the tax on, the council tax, and yet services are getting more and more expensive. Would it not be a good idea for all the parishes to increase their precept a little bit, and we could all put that money into helping fund the services that we need?" And he said, "I'm against increasing taxes." And so I couldn't really work that out. If we don't increase taxes, we're not going to have any services. And I think that it's a very, very important thing. Our party would increase taxes, but we want a fairer tax system for everyone, and those with the broadest shoulders should carry the biggest weight. Thank you.
Thanks, Alistair, for the question. Hard-working people wouldn't be paying any extra tax under our plans. The Liberal Democrats wouldn't raise taxes on hard-working people. We won't raise income tax, national insurance or VAT. But what we would do is make sure that we put a proper windfall tax on the oil and gas giants, something that the Conservatives haven't done, because they're too concerned about hitting the hard-working people with years and years of unfair stealth taxes. And for me, it's the last thing that people need is even a greater tax burden. And of course, the Conservatives have actually handed a massive tax cut to the big banks. So we would remove these tax breaks to the big banks. We'd also put a levy on social media companies, and that would help to fund a national health professional in every school. And also, we'd look at a share of the buyback tax system that has worked really well in America for President Biden.
Thank you. Absolutely, the state of our public services give a lot to bemoan, despite taxes being at their post-war record high. Firstly, Labour is not promising any unfunded tax cuts, unlike the Conservatives. Labour will not increase taxes on working people. However, we will increase some specific taxes because we need an honest conversation about the state of our public services. We will also focus on growing our economy because clearly that has not happened under the Conservatives. We need to grow our economy so we can invest and reinvest in our public services. On the specific tax increases we're talking about, we're going to tax the non-DOMs properly. VAT on private school fees should no longer be exempt and will not be under Labour. And closing private equity loopholes so, as so clearly needed, as has been touched on, we can fund our public services properly.
So there's a philosophical difference between most of the parties sat to my left and myself. And as a Conservative, I believe that low taxes are good. We hear Labour talking about giveaways, but I'm talking about people keeping the money that they earn. We know in economies like Japan and America, they're faster growing, they have smaller taxes. And it's a different, like I say, philosophy. But we need to spend taxpayers' money properly. And what we see in many areas of government is wastage. And I want to make sure that that is driven out. We need to make sure that we are collecting the taxes we need and not a penny more. Because I believe that it's your choice what you do with the money that you earn, and that you should choose whether you need to spend on X or Y. So with Conservatives, you will pay the tax that are needed for services. You will get a government that is growing the economy and following the model that works in other parts of the world that are growing fast in the same way that we are in technology. So if you want to keep more of your money and choose how you spend it yourself, you will vote Conservative.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, the less tax that's collected from me and the less government intervention in my life, the happier I am. I bemoan the nanny state, and you'll see a theme through a lot of my answers, is the fact that I fight and my passion is for those people that are really struggling and the poorest families. Now, there's certain things that we do as a country at the minute where we could save quite a bit of money. One in particular is with the Bank of England, and that we pay interest on reserves that the commercial banks hold with us to the tune of some 20 to 40 billion pounds a year, depending on the base rate. I'd like to pause HS2. I say pause because we might come back to it again when perhaps we're feeling a bit flusher, and use that money to raise the tax threshold to 20,000. And that was one of the first things that piqued my interest in reform, was the raising of the tax threshold and the lowering of energy bills. Because our energy bills at the minute are, on average, we're paying 44 cents per kilowatt hour. Compare that to America, 17 or 18. And then we've got India and China paying about 7 or 8. Why? Because we put VAT on our energy bills and we put on a big renewable subsidy. I would remove both of those. Now, in terms of putting more money in the hands of hard-working families, the other side of that is the reforming of public services that, for me, have become bloated and ineffective. The civil service is currently sitting at 500,000, and if you look at the NHS, most of the parties are arguing to throw more money at it, but the fact is we've put in £10 billion and there's been no increase in productivity.
So we now come to our second written question, and the candidates will answer this in the same sequence, but starting from a different place. It's quite complicated, but we'll get there. And this question is about what the candidates can offer that is positive for our future. And it's an amalgam of two questions that people have asked, because they cover the same ground. So it's a question asked by Tricia Rawlinson-Plant, and also from a student at King's School called George. And Tricia puts it like this: I think that most of us are feeling pretty depressed with the financial state of the country, how nothing much seems to work nowadays, and how it has impacted on most of us. Can any of the candidates give us something exciting, creative, and innovative to look forward to, especially for the young? And then similarly, George puts it like this: what do the parties offer to young people like me, due to leave school in just over a year's time? So, a positive offer for the future, and the first person to answer that question is Sarah.
Thank you. Well, it's certainly, this general election is a chance to kick Rishi Sunak's appalling Conservative out of office and deliver the change that the public is crying out for. The Liberal Democrats offer a really positive choice in this area, and particularly for young people. We would offer all adults a learning budget of £5,000 every year for every adult. Now, I think that is something that is really positive, so people can continue to learn throughout their lives. And I believe in being able to continue to play sport. I've been really lucky. I've played National Premiership 1 rugby and really enjoyed my rugby career and many other sports. So I would look to protect sports and arts funding through the National Lottery, because I think everybody should have access to be able to play sport and leisure. Now, importantly, we would negotiate free and simple short-term travel for UK artists to perform across Europe and beyond, because I believe that young people should be able to travel and work abroad, particularly across Europe, to have those experiences that we've all enjoyed, to work, learn and love. And I certainly won't be marching you, any young people, into national service like the Conservatives.
Thank you, Tricia, for that question. To slightly botch a well-known phrase, I am young, Labour, and excited. Labour has a positive message of hope and change. To keep this simple, I'm just going to reel some things that I am genuinely excited that Labour is offering at this election. Building 1.5 million social and affordable homes, 61,000 jobs in the southwest with Great British Energy, saving on our NHS, democratising the House of Lords, votes at 16, clean energy by 2030, a new deal for working people, and 6,500 new teachers. Thank you.
So I think the exciting thing that I offer young people and all people is the opportunity to actually be proud of our country and to look at our record and how we are seen in the world. I've worked all over the world, and when you come from a British company, people are interested in what you've got to say. You've only got to look at our tech sector. If young people are interested in tech, we have more unicorns, more billion-dollar startup companies in this country than Germany, France and Sweden combined. Now that's a really exciting area to get into. We're looking to lead on AI as well. And if you want to study anywhere in the world, there is the fantastic Turin program, which has replaced Erasmus, which gave you access to Europe. This gives you access to the world. You want to study in Japan? Go for Turin. I would like to say also, though, that we've got to offer something positive for everybody, not just young people. There's some great jobs, apprenticeship opportunities for young people. There's lifelong learning funds, and you check my Twitter feed, and it's hashtag lifelong learning way back for years, because the Conservatives have delivered that funding. And for older people, we need to make sure there are the facilities for them to go out and enjoy their lives as well, because life does not stop at 65.
Me. So I touched on this earlier in terms of education. For you, going forward to university, I'd want to scrap the interest rates, allowing you a chance to be able to pay off your loans. Now, beyond that, affordable housing is such a key thing. So that, again, I touched on this earlier, the fact you could buy yourself an affordable house that's built on the latest technology, cheap to heat. I love the idea of supporting marriage, so potentially with the tax threshold being raised to £20,000, if you were married and you had children, then you could then transfer some of that to the person that's going out working. And my dream is to have a country where you have a family that are raising a child, where one person is able to go out to work and support the whole family. And that's something that hasn't been able to have been achieved in at least a generation. Now, going forward in terms of our energy, I think nuclear is the answer. I would like to see a country that is energy independent rather than dependent. I would like to see a country that increases the amount of food that we produce. We're currently making about 50% of our food. I want to see that number go up. How amazing to be part of a country that is energy and food independent. And my absolute dream is to find a way to go forward together, so that regardless of age, race or religion, we start to find what we have in common rather than our differences and the slightest reason to be offended.
My experience is not just married people who have kids. Anyway, what will we do? When I was a kid, it was a long time ago, I had two options, to go carry on an education or get a job. And if you get a job today, the Green Party will make everybody on the same wage of £15 an hour minimum wage, regardless of age. So everybody has the same opportunity. We also have equal rights for all age groups in work. So that's the work side. On the education side, we would scrap tuition fees completely. So what we try and do is make those two things very attractive for young people. Education, no cost, and if you're working, you get paid the same as everyone else. I could go on about housing and all that sort of stuff, but housing is something that's more important to everybody. But these are two things that we offer the youth of today. I hope they sound exciting. I certainly could have done with £15 an hour when I was a kid.
Thank you. Our third question is on the topic of education, and how we will go first on this one. And it's a question that's been given to us by Kate Cravero, I hope I've pronounced that right, who describes herself as a mum of three. And her question is this: can we talk about education? My son is in a normal state school. He's being taught science in a class of 50 students. This is in year 10. And then to the candidates, what are you going to do about the lack of teachers, especially in rural areas? We have been, and quite clearly are in, an absolute crisis. How will you make a difference? So tackling that question first for us is Hal Huberman.
Thank you, Kate, for that question. I went to state school here in Bruton, as did my 4 siblings, and as do my 2 nephews and 2 nieces, 2 of whom are at the back. When I was at Bruton Primary, it was under a Labour government. Boy, now do I feel privileged to have had that opportunity. Now, for my nephews and nieces, they go to Bruton Primary and Horsington, following £7.6 million in cuts to Somerset State schools. I'm proud to stand on Labour's record on education, increasing real terms education funding by 78% in our 13 years. And I'm also proud to stand on Labour's plan for government and education. Labour will end, as I've said, the VAT exemption on private school fees and reinvest that money into the state sector, where it's really needed. We will recruit 6,500 new teachers, have mental health professionals in every school, and provide free breakfast clubs in every primary school, supporting the teachers, as Kate said. They need that support. How's that sound, Sonny and Zed?
So I would need a lot more than 60 seconds to explain how dangerous Labour's plans are for education. I served as Cabinet Member for Education at Somerset Council for 3 years until 2021. I know the situation our schools are in here. I fought for extra funding and I did get it, but we do need more funding for our rural schools. But if we put a VAT tax on independent schools, that will cause some of the local schools to close. I've talked to parents, I've talked to the schools, and they are under threat. And what we will see is young people coming back into the state system, which is already struggling, which we keep needing to work on, which is why a Conservative government is offering bonuses to teachers. My cousin's daughter is about to start as a maths teacher, having studied at a really good university. She's going to go and inspire the next generation of young people. If we put those people whose parents have been paying back into state school, then the state school system will not survive. And those taxes that they're looking to raise will not come because all independent study is showing that some people will not be able to afford it.
So I've been a teacher now for about 20 years, and there's no doubt that there's a problem with recruitment. I was listening to the radio on the way over, and they said that for the last year they've managed to recruit, in terms of maths, 63% of their target, and for science or physics was even worse, about 17%. I think simply it's a case that we need to attack this from two sort of angles. One is making sure that they're paid a decent salary. When I joined the teaching profession, I was given a golden hello, which was £5,000 cash. And I think money does talk in that respect. So I think there has to be some sort of incentive to get particularly scientists to come into teaching. I think there's been a lack of respect over the years that has been directed towards teachers, and that's got worse over the time that I've been in the profession. So there needs to be an improvement in terms of discipline in schools. So reform would double the number of PRUs to make sure those students that need the extra support can be taken out and leaving the rest of the classes to be able to get on with their work. And without a doubt, for me, I would want to scrap Ofsted, because that is the number one headache of all teachers everywhere. They aren't fit for purpose, and I think the teachers need to be allowed to get on with their job and trusted to be professionals.
I find it strange to be feeling an empathy to Reform UK's answer, but I think it's true. We do need to respect our teachers, and we do need to give them a decent salary. But the issue here isn't really one about listening to us talk about that. It's about the political will of the party and government to pay decent wages, to make sure that teachers are retained, to put more money and resource into schools. They'll tell you now about how they're going to do all of that, but we've seen Labour governments, we've seen Tory governments, they don't put enough money into the schools for common people. And I also think that, I don't understand why the private schools get all these tax breaks. I think that that's a strange thing. But if we can try and elevate and invest the amount of money that is invested in private schools, we'd have an amazing country. It's political will that's the issue.
I believe that education is the best investment that we can make in our children's potential and our country's future. But the Conservatives have consistently let our children down, and our parents, and they've neglected schools and colleges. They've failed to grasp the scale of the damage of the COVID pandemic that's done to our children's learning and their mental health. We would invest in education. And to specifically answer the question around teacher recruitment and retention, we would create a teacher workforce strategy to ensure that every secondary school child is taught by a specialist teacher in their subject. We'd reform the school teachers review body and funding, make sure that there's funding for teacher training and do that properly. And also introduce a clear, properly funded programme of high quality professional development for all teachers. Now, what Faye didn't tell you when she was cabinet member at Somerset County Council, when the Liberal Democrats took over in 22, we uncovered a backlog of school repairs totalling £50 million with no plan. Faye, are you proud of that?
Since there was a direct question posed, I will give Faye 15 seconds to reply to that.
Sarah's correct, there was a backlog, and it came from 2009 when we took over from the Lib Dems, and I pushed for more funding, and there's been more funding, and as the MP and a person with a background in construction, I know what we need to ask for, I know the quantity surveyors that can do it, and I will
You
get
closed
that
schools
done.
down, Faye, right throughout the country.
I saved 6 schools in Somerset,
when you were
Sarah.
cabinet
Read
member
the
for
facts.
education, you did nothing to campaign for fair funding for our schools. You failed our schools in Somerset.
Okay, we've heard both sides of that one.
10%.
Thank you for that. We're going to move to a new topic for our fourth pre-submitted question, and the topic for this one is inequality. And again, this is an amalgam of 2 questions covering the same territory that have been received. The first is from Ben and Vic Wilson, and it is this: inequality in the UK has grown significantly in the last decade. This is in terms of education, wages, public services, housing and healthcare. How are you going to close the growing inequality gap in the UK? And then a similar question from Judy Stober, still on this same topic of inequality. It's not true that the UK is short of money, it's awash with it, but it's very badly distributed, and it's been getting worse over the last 14 years. I see this as one of the underlying and major problems facing the country, affecting almost every aspect of life, from the number of families in relative and absolute poverty, the state of the public services, and of course, tackling the climate crisis. And then here's the question: do you and your party recognise this? And what policies does your party have to start rectifying it? Answering first on this for us is Faye Purvick.
Well, you're getting us to say a lot in 60 seconds, aren't you? Okay, so I'm going to start off. Education is the best way to address inequality, and I've already talked about our record on that. But just a few numbers: 4th best readers in the world. Best readers in the world are 9-year-olds, all born since the Conservatives took over government. 11th best for maths, and that's because we were a little bit slower at starting the maths programme. But what I want to see us doing is delivering on the pledges that we've made. So free childcare from 9 months old. I know I was a single parent, and being in work and earning a wage and showing my son what that looked like was the best way for us to progress in our lives. I want to keep wages moving, and we doubled the tax-free allowance for people during the last government. We've just announced that child benefit is now going to be per household. So if you've got one person earning £120,000 or 2 people earning 50 and whatever it is to add up to £120,000, then they will still get that access to child benefit. And I think that's really important. It's investing in our young people. It's getting people out to work if they want to. It's meaning people can stay at home if they want to too. There's lots more I could say, but I won't let you ring the bell on me. Thank you.
So there was always a theory called trickle-down economics, where if you allowed those that were successful and to go on and to make more money, that somehow that would trickle down to everybody else. That clearly doesn't work. It hasn't been the case. As I've said before, my focus would be on those families that are struggling the most. And I think if we can allow those individuals to access good education in terms of apprenticeships, I think there's real value to apprenticeships, that idea of passing along generational knowledge, as opposed to maybe taking the university route. Reskilling for those people that are looking to re-enter the workforce or to have a career change, affordable housing for all, across the board, decent NHS access, so in terms of access to a GP and a dentist, if that would be entirely possible. And by that, I mean recruiting more GPs and nurses and dentists, and making sure that those on the lowest incomes are able to afford decent housing, access decent public services, and access decent education. That, for me, is the way forward.
So thank you very much. A great question. Education, we need to invest in education. The Green Party will invest in education. We talked about that just now. Wages, £15 an hour for everybody, and we would be making sure that it's a level playing field for all people, all workers. Public services, you cannot get public services without taxation, so we would have to increase taxes. But we want a fairer tax system that actually makes those with the broadest shoulders pay the right amount so that they pay more. Housing, it's a broken housing system. We need to build the houses that are required, not the houses that the developers want. We need to do housing needs assessments in every place and then build the houses that are needed for the local people. And we need to put more money into affordable and social housing. Healthcare, the Green Party would put $50 billion a year into the National Health Service to try and get it back to the state of play that the original people who founded it in the 1940s saw, a vision for health across the UK. Thank you.
Now, I've already outlined that education is absolutely fundamental. Just as a couple of proof points, Bruton Primary School has received cuts of £37,114 since 2010-2011, and Sexies has received cuts of £691,990 since 2021. Those are the impacts that we've had under a Conservative government. But for me, also, we've got health, because health gives us the freedom to live our lives as we choose, and a thriving economy needs a healthy population. So the Liberal Democrats believe that people should be in control of their own lives and health, and it means everyone should get the care that they need when they need it and where they need it. We cannot have a health service that is reliant on private care. We need to ensure that our NHS thrives. You know, our NHS used to be the envy of the world, but now just too many people just cannot access it. The Conservatives have plunged us and the NHS into crisis.
Yeah, that's a really important set of questions. Inequality was the reason the Labour Party was formed. Inequality was the reason that I joined the Labour Party. Labour's plan for government will always be driven by a commitment to tackling inequality. I will too always be driven by this. I've talked about our plans for education. Labour's tax plan focuses on those with the broadest shoulders: private equity, non-DOMs and private schools. That will tackle inequality. And Labour's New Deal for working people will return dignity and respect to employees and address the imbalance between workers and bosses. We are driven, as I said, by fighting inequality. Vote Labour for a fairer, greener future.
So we're going to do some quick-fire questions. Okay? Quick-fire, 10 seconds to answer. Okay, pass those down. We're going to take these questions as quick-fire, just a 10-second answer. So, just to change the pace a little bit, we're now going to have some quick-fire questions, which I've only just given to the candidates, and they're going to have only 10 seconds each to answer. So not much more than a yes-no. It's very limited indeed what they will be able to say. All of these questions have been given to us by students, politics students at King's School, Bruton. And the first one comes from a student called Tom. And I'm going to take all of these questions, just to avoid the risk of confusion, in order down the table, starting with Faye. Okay, is that all right?
So I start.
You will start all of them, okay? So it's going to go in order down the table from my right, your left, starting with Faye. So Tom's question is about immigration, and it is this: do you think immigration numbers are an issue? And what policy would you like to see on immigration?
Yes, I'd like to see the policy that's in our manifesto, and it's about weighing up the pros and cons of everything, what it's going to cost in terms of services, what it's going to cost in terms of GDP per capita. Read the manifesto, it's a really good policy.
Thank you. Excellent. That was 10 seconds. It's pretty quick. So next on that is John.
Immigration is a really tricky point, isn't it? But we need workers, and the demographic of this country is getting older. Where are those workers going to come from if they don't come from other countries?
Okay, thank you.
Our public services are in such a state that the Tories and Reform are trying to make this an issue. I agree with John. We need these workers and a basic sense of humanity.
The immigration system is totally broken by the Conservatives. The Liberal Democrat will tackle the asylum backlog by establishing a dedicated unit outside of the Home Office to improve the speed and quality of that decision making. Our migrants and the workers are so important to this country.
So the population at the minute, for me, again, I would just like to pause. We have 400,000 people that naturally leave the country every year, so there's plenty of flexibility there for smart, controlled immigration.
Our next quickfire question is about the climate, and it's been posed for us by Harriet, and the question is this: is there really a climate crisis? Or would you say there is more climate alarmism? Given your answer, how should we respond?
So we need to obviously address the climate issue. I think we use the word crisis for everything and it dilutes it. There's a lot that needs to be done, and we can be the world leaders in the technology and the way forward for how we do that. We've already halved our carbon output, and we should keep leading the world.
So yes, there is a climate crisis. 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels is what we're supposed to be aiming at. That's already a disaster. So the only thing we can do is adapt to the changes that are coming, and for here that means a lot of flooding.
I don't think there's quite enough climate alarmism, actually. We need net zero by 2030 with the jobs and the investment that will bring.
Of course, climate change is the biggest threat that we're all facing. The Conservative government has failed to act with anything close to the speed and ambition that these challenges demand. The Liberal Democrats are committed to cutting greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2045.
Yeah, I think there has to be a balance here. I mean, it's right that we cut our CO2 emissions, but we have to recognise the fact that we make 1% of the world's emissions as it is. So I don't think at the minute we're in a position where we need to make ourselves so much poorer by putting in net zero.
Now we have our next quickfire question is posed for us by Alexina. I hope I've pronounced that right. And it's this: should politicians have a say in what is taught in schools? Or should that be down to a politically independent body?
I think society should have a say in what's taught in schools, not necessarily politicians, whether it's an independent body, but there should be a consensus on what we teach. And I think there needs to be lots more looking at history as well, because that's how we learn about the future.
No, it shouldn't be down to politicians. Yes, it should be down to somebody independent who is a professional.
Very good question. More expert inclusion, absolutely.
I absolutely can't disagree with anything that's been mentioned. It should be down to the professionals to make sure that they give our children the best education possible.
Yeah, in no way should it be political. It should be assigned by an independent body. But then, I mean, really, maths, English, your humanities, science, PE, I think that they're sort of self-explanatory and kind of self-picking, really.
Then our last of the quickfire questions before we start to open it up and take questions from the floor. The last of our quickfire questions is posed for us by Olivia, and it's this. Should national service be reintroduced, and why?
95% of young people doing national service will do voluntary work. At the moment, a lot of middle-class kids are getting that opportunity, others aren't. It's a great way to level everybody up so everybody can experience being a volunteer.
No, but opportunity should be available to all.
Absolutely not. How about jobs, apprenticeships and opportunity?
Most definitely not. We should be encouraging people to explore and develop their own skills and direct them in the careers that they want to go in.
Yeah, the answer is no. I mean, the Army won't thank you for having to run national service. I do like the idea of a community service where people of a certain age work in a community setting to help for the common good. But in terms of national service, having spoken to quite a few military people, absolutely no.
Thank you for those answers and for the questions. So now we come to questions from the floor. And the way this will work is that if you would like to ask a question, please simply raise your hand nice and high. I will then choose from among the hands that I can see, and a person will bring you the microphone. Once you've got the microphone, please speak your question nice and clearly. And then the questions, as I said at the start, will be put to all the candidates. They'll take them in turn, and they will do so in the order of in fact, it's in the order in which they're sitting again. So it's alphabetical order of political party, starting with Faye for the Conservatives, working down the table in the same sequence that we've just done. So we will probably take 5 or 6 questions. It depends how quick they can be. So if you'd like to raise a question, I'll be ready with the microphones. Have one on one side of the room and one on the other, please. And I'm going to take a question first from the gentleman sitting more or less central, wearing a beard. Just sitting, yes. No, sitting centrally, yes. Yes. So wait for the microphone.
Oh, just a couple of things you haven't covered. The WHO treaty that Andrew Bridges has been talking about, which will give away our sovereignty in this upcoming WHO treaty. You also haven't talked about the amount of money which is actually debt. Our money is debt. I hope you all realise that money, they don't understand money, and every time that they're actually talking about spending money, that is actually increasing our debt, because the Bank of England is the only issuer of debt. So, having said that, what are you going to do about the Bank of England and its prosecution of usury? Are we going to see a nationalisation of the Bank of England so the profits of this currently private bank go back into the nation to the profit of everybody in this room and the generations to come?
So let me see if I can just encapsulate that question. The second part is, what are you going to do about the Bank of England, which it said is operating as more like a private bank? Will you national? The first part was about the WHO. So what's the question about the WHO?
Absolutely obsolete, and also the war with Russia. You know, the amount of money we're sending to the...
No, let's just stick with the WHO treaty. I think we'll just stick with the Bank of England question because that's narrowly focused. I'm not quite sure I could detect the question in the WHO point. So the Bank of England, it said, is operating as a private bank. Will you nationalise it? You have up to a minute. You don't need to use the full minute if you don't want to. Up to a minute each.
No, I wouldn't nationalise the Bank of England. I think the independence of the Bank of England is one of the checks and balances that we have within government, and I would leave it as it is.
I feel strangely attracted to the thought of a nationalised Bank of England. I don't know why. I'm very interested in the fractional reserve banking sort of situation that we have in this country, and the people say there's no magic money tree, and then suddenly there is, and suddenly there isn't. There's a lot of questions around money, but the matter of fact is that we've all agreed to use it, and therefore it is the only commodity available to us if we want to get stuff done.
Gordon Brown and Labour proudly made the Bank of England independent. Despite what the Tories might tell you in the next few weeks, Labour does not have plans to nationalise the Bank of England.
I agree that the Bank of England should remain fully independent.
I think in terms of the Monetary Policy Committee, I agree with the fact that that should remain independent in terms of setting interest rates. The bank in itself, I think there's an argument to be made for renationalising that. Nothing's off the table as far as I'm concerned if it's going to work in the interests of the British people. And quickly in terms of the WHO and the WF, Reform's position is that they would backtrack from both of those organisations for national sovereignty.
Thank you. Okay, who else would like to ask a question? So there's a young lady right at the back with black hair. There we are. Yeah.
The British Armed Forces is currently billions of pounds in debt, as well as them laying off over about 3,000 jobs in the army in the last 3 months. And they're no longer recognising equality, diversity, inclusion as a role in the army. What would you want to do to help with this and make it more important?
Thank you. So there was a question about the level of debt, the level of reduction within the armed forces, the lack of recognition of gender equality and diversity, and what would you do to address that situation? So problems in the armed services.
So the Conservatives have pledged to bring GDP 2.5% spending to the defence, and we need to do that, and actually I think we need to go further. The armed forces are in a different shape than they were at the end of the Cold War because we weren't facing state-on-state war for a number of years. It's been about terrorism. We need to reshape again now. We are moving towards the time when there probably will be state-on-state war, and we need to reshape our armed forces to suit that, and that's something that I trust a Conservative government to do more than I do a Labour government who won't commit to the spending. On the equality, diversity side of things, we need to welcome everybody to our armed forces. We're one of the first armed forces in the world to do so, and I joined the armed forces, although very, very briefly due to an injury, and I would encourage anybody who feels like they want to serve in our armed forces to get involved.
We clearly need to invest in our conventional armed forces. It's extraordinary that we don't, especially considering the situation that we have in the world at the moment. As far as diversity is concerned, we have equality laws, we have diversity laws, and it really should be down to the armed forces themselves to review that within their own organisations.
Thank you for that thoughtful question. The Tories have cut our army to its smallest size since Napoleonic times, and they've missed their recruitment targets every single year. Labour's commitment to our armed forces and our national defence and security is ironclad and absolute. On the specific question of equality and diversity, I would really like to see the army refocus on equality and diversity, and Labour is committed to doing that. Anything a Labour government will do will further equality.
Thank you very much for the question. We're keeping our country secure should be the first priority for any government. We must take defence absolutely seriously. The government have been complacent and irresponsible in cutting troop numbers by 10,000 over the last few years. In terms of the equality, I actually spoke in Parliament a couple of months ago because we've got lots of constituents who work in defence around Yeovilton, Leonardo, tallies, and there is a brilliant scheme around Aero Women programme, and that is there to meet the 30-30 targets in defence, to make sure more women enter into defence and work within defence. So now I've been calling very much for the government to really push forward on that, because they are very much behind.
The first thing with defence, I think, is the fact that recruitment has to come back in-house, so not being contracted out to third parties. I mean, when I joined the army, I walked into the careers office and there was a sergeant sat behind the desk, and that was the way that my career started. Defence spending has to go up. We're going to raise it to 2.5% of GDP, and then over the next 5 years up to 3%. There needs to be an urgent pay review, whereas at the minute we've got private soldiers that are getting paid less than Amazon workers. Some of the housing is substandard, so we need to improve that, and we need to look after our veterans better and make sure that they are getting the care that they need after they've served their country, and certainly not facing prosecution from wars and theatres that they've served in previously. In terms of diversity and inclusion, I don't know. As long as it's not to a quota, I mean, I'd rather they just hired the best person for the job.
Thank you again. Please indicate if you'd like to ask a question. So we're going to take the gentleman sitting about halfway down on the end of the row on this side. Just wait for the microphone, please, and we can all hear. And those online can hear.
Thank you very much. I wanted to use a word that hasn't been used much in this election campaign. Brexit. Could I ask each person, how did you vote? How do you think it's going? And how would you proceed?
Thank you. Admirably concise, if I may say so. How did you vote? How do you think it's going? And how would you proceed from here?
I voted to leave. I think that there's a lot of opportunities that haven't been taken yet, and we saw the slowdown during COVID with some of the progress there. I think some of the trade deals could have been done better. I think we're doing a lot better with the later trade deals, and I would proceed by being proud about being British and using all those soft skills that I talked about that I experienced working around the world to get out there, sell our country and work as a global power. It's not just about what's next door, it's about working with everybody, and Britain is best placed in the world to do that.
So we could rephrase that question about climate, couldn't we? Have we got a Brexit crisis or Brexit alarmism? And we were really sold down the river with the misinformation that we were given about what it means to leave Europe. I voted Remain. I think it's going really well. And I think we should look at rejoining.
Hey.
How did I vote? I was too young to vote. I wouldn't be. Should it have been in the next few years? Labour's going to reduce the voting age to 16.
That's not the question.
I know. But put simply, it's been a disaster since day one, June the 24th, 2016. Labour will work hard, and I will support this for closer ties with our European neighbours. They're our closest allies and our best of friends.
I voted for Remain, and of course I'm a Liberal Democrat. Of course I want to see the UK back at the heart of the European Union, but I think we have to take a pragmatic approach. We're a long way off that. There are steps to be able to get us back there. We need to see the UK back in the single market. We've got, free movement. We've got to ensure that immigration is far higher under the Conservatives than it was when we were in the European Union. And we now need to make sure, as we move forward, we fix the damage that has been done by the Conservatives' botched trade deals with Europe.
So as I sit here representing the Reform Party, formerly the Brexit Party, I voted to Remain. Now, The thing is, actually, is that we voted for this democratically in 2016. And for me, I think it's just we have to accept the fact that we need to accept that judgment of the people. I know it was close. I would much rather now, the talk of going back in, if they'd have us, I find it amazing, because I would rather now just find a way forward, leave fully. And for me, one of the big bonuses is the realisation of our national sovereignty and being able to leave something like the European Convention of Human Rights. Because for me, I've always felt that the highest court in this land should be on this land. Thank you.
Thank you again. So please indicate now if you'd like to ask a question. I'm going to take the lady sitting on the side aisle, about halfway back.
Is that on? Yep. I noted Sarah made a comment about having more women in defence. I'd be quite interested to see how each of the panellists actually defines who and what a woman is.
Okay, so that's a question about identity, specifically female identity. And the question is, how would each of you define who a woman is, what a woman is?
A woman is an adult human female with the genomes to suggest that.
So in law, in the protected characteristic of sex, there are just two. There are men and women, and a woman is a female adult human. But there is also another protected characteristic, which is gender, and that is a spectrum.
A woman, yes, is a female adult human, and I agree with John, but gender is a spectrum.
Yeah, adult human female. But this is a really toxic debate, hasn't it? It's become really, really divisive, and it's become really toxic and hostile. We need to get past that and have a really good faith conversation, because for me, ensuring everyone's safety and dignity is absolutely paramount.
I think the fact is that people are always going to disagree about this, and that's okay. In a free country where there's freedom of speech, whatever you might think, I mean, it's all right. For me personally, and you don't have to agree with this, there's two genders. And the idea it's a spectrum, I've never seen an argument that will convince me otherwise. But my personal opinion, that's it.
Good again, so please indicate if you'd like to ask a question. I'm going to take the gentleman just in the front here in the green top, and remember to make it a nice focused question for all the panellists.
Can you hear me okay? Oh, yes. My question's about the exodus of young people leaving not just Somerset but the southwest in general, because I've read lots of them are leaving Somerset and the West Country for London and other places. But we need people coming in. We need more, because the South. I mean, just from what I read, and young people I know here, I mean, might sort of want to leave in a few years or sooner. So what would you do to attract people to this constituency, to Somerset and the Southwest, and what would you do to really, trumpet Glastonbury, Somerton, Bruton Street and the villages, both for tourists and at Westminster? So.
Thank you. So it's about the exodus of young people from this area, the Southwest in general, and developing that slightly. What would you do to trumpet this area as a place for people to come?
Well, I come at this from two directions. My father was a toolmaker. You might have heard that a lot recently. But he actually ran the apprenticeship programme at Normal Leg Out and later Western Helicopters. So I grew up around really great quality apprenticeships, young people going out, earning and learning. and figuring out what they wanted to do in the world. And that may have led to a degree, or it may have just been that they kept working. So I will champion apprenticeships across all sectors within this area. And there are some great businesses that we can attract to the area, along with our further education colleges, to get that training done, whether that be automotive, whether that be digital, whatever. But I left here as a young person because those opportunities didn't exist. And I was so happy to come back home, to be near my family and to give back, to try and make those opportunities for young people. So apprenticeships, good education, and actually, obviously we need the homes for them to live in as well. But we haven't got time to talk about that one. But homes, apprenticeships, and being proud of where we come from.
I know that Bruton's a pretty cool place, and you've got the Hasramworth up the road there. How fantastic is that? I live in Glastonbury, and that's a pretty cool place too. And in fact, we live in a pretty cool place, don't we? It's a really beautiful, amazing place. We've got the biggest creative arts festival in the world in our place, and this constituency is called Glastonbury and Somerton. So why aren't we capitalising on that? I can never understand why we don't capitalise on that. We should be the cultural, artistic, musical centre of Britain, if not the world. And we should be investing heavily into those industries here. And all of the industries that support that, all the engineering, all of those other things that support this amazing, beautiful, fantastic Glastonbury area. Let's invest in what we're good at.
Thank you, Kit. That's a great question. I left Bruton to work, but I do just keep coming back, though never enough to please my mum. I think this is quite simple. This is investment both from the public and the private sector in jobs and apprenticeships, affordable and social homes, and just working public infrastructure and public transport.
Well, Somerset, as we know, is a large and vast, beautiful landscape county. But we need to build a strong and fair economy that benefits everybody in the county. We need to help people back into work. We need to be able to support small businesses. We need to be able to improve productivity. And we need to be able to support our farmers and those within the food system. The Conservatives have badly managed the economy, we all know that. But for me, we have a great opportunity here in Somerset to push forward with an innovative green economy. Let's create green jobs that are fit for the future, sustainable, and let's invest in our future and the young people to give them the jobs that are fit for the future.
For me, I think it's a natural part of life to want to spread your wings and to leave the home. And I would expect my son, when he hits the right age, 18, 19, to move on. Not to say that it's a permanent thing. I mean, for me, when I left Glastonbury, I joined the army, went to university. And when I decided to pick somewhere to have a family and to settle, I came back. It's a beautiful part of the country, but I don't feel bad about the fact that the young people are leaving, because for me, that's a natural part of life to want to go off and explore.
Again, please indicate if you'd like to ask a question. I'm going to pick the gentleman here in the brown jacket, second or third row.
Hi there. What are you going to do in order to help families on low income who are choosing to either heat their home or eat during the winter? Thank you very much.
So the choice between heating and eating for young families in winter time, what are you going to do to help?
So I think one of the really important things that we've done is made sure that there's money available to those families, and we need to make sure we're signposting it. It's one of the things I do as a councillor is signpost people so they know the money that is available. So there was £92 billion worth of funding put in. Many of us had our electricity bills, half of them paid, and the work that we're doing has started to drive down energy costs, and we'll see another cut again in July. I think it's really important that we make sure that we're supporting our farmers so that we can produce good food that people are able to buy. I'm also a passionate cook, and I think it's really important that we're teaching people how to feed themselves well within our schools so that young people can grow up to do that as well. But ultimately, the biggest boost from poverty is to have good paid work, and I think having childcare available for people so they can go and do that, creating the jobs that people want to do, boosting the national living wage, which we have, and boosting the amount of the amount of people who can access child benefit as well.
It's a very interesting situation to find myself here talking about people going to Parliament. But I think that everyday common people are not served well by politicians. It's almost as if they don't care about us. They don't care about the quality of housing that we have or the quality of food that we have. They make all these sounds about how they care, but when it comes down to it, they don't. They don't seem to respect common people in any way. We need much better way of being able to have homes that are insulated, that don't cost a load of money to run, better built homes to begin with. We also need to have wages that are really living wages, not just minimum wages, living wages for people. But so long as we keep voting in people who are billionaires into the House of Commons, we're never going to sort this out, because they have no idea how I live or you live.
Thank you. I think that's a brilliant question. It used to be heating or eating. I think sometimes recently it's been neither for many people. Just on Labour's plans for reducing the cost of living, I think this is one of the most important things that the next government really has to tackle. Labour will make Britain a clean energy superpower, making energy bills cheaper, whilst also investing both, again, public and private investment in insulating homes, making energy bills cheaper. Labour will also provide free breakfast clubs in every primary school. Kids going to school hungry, they can't learn. Parents being unable to afford to feed them. It's the cost of living crisis. It's the Tory cost of living crisis. And Labour will not increase taxes on working people.
I'm really pleased you brought this question up. Actually, it was an excellent question. We're living in the worst cost of living crisis for the last 50 years. You know, I've been out speaking to people on the doorsteps. They can't get an NHS dentist. They can't see a doctor. Have to go privately to see a dentist. People are visiting food banks. Nurses I've spoken to are visiting food banks. There's more food banks across the country than there are McDonald's restaurants. It's simply not right. We need to be able to ensure that we have a good NHS service that's free at the point of service. We also need to build homes and more homes so people have access to affordable homes, and they need to be built in the right place at the right time to the best environmental standards.
So we're currently in a situation where as a country we've got 4 million children living in poverty, 1 million of which are near destitute, so they can't afford the basics of food, shelter and warmth, and yet we've got a Chancellor of the Exchequer that's telling us £100,000 is a pretty average wage. We've got families that are struggling to, as you rightly say, decide whether they're going to put food on the table or heat their homes, and yet we have energy companies that are posting multi-billion pound profit. The fact is the unfairness in the system has got to change, and it's got to change now. So for me, the idea, as I've said, raising that tax threshold and putting more money in the hands of hard-working families, lowering the energy bills. They're too expensive for the reasons I've mentioned, the VAT and the renewable subsidies and this drive towards net zero. We've got to have some more practical, common sense answers to the problems that we face. Because right now we're punishing this current generation. So for me, we've got to make sure that we put more money in the hands of these poorest families.
Okay, this is going to be the last question from the floor, so if you've been a bit shy or holding back to see what other questions might be asked, this is the last one before we move on. So if you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand. The lady over there in the bluey-green top.
Thank you very much. So the pro-Palestinian marches have been going on for over 6 months now. Everybody is under duress in London during the weekends. The revenue must be going down. Apart from the fact that they're calling for jihad, and there are Hamas leaders living in England, when is enough enough? What would you do about it?
Thank you for the question. So the question is in the specific context of the pro-Palestinian marches in London and the impact that that has on other people's lives. And the question is, when is enough enough? And what are you going to do about it?
I think ultimately what we need to do is deliver on a sustainable ceasefire, get all the hostages out of Gaza, and find the people who are responsible for the 7th of October. We live in a country where people are entitled to protest, and the police have the powers that they need to manage that. But the way to solve the problem is to address the root cause, and that is about a sustainable ceasefire in Gaza. I spent a decade in the Middle East, and we've seen many things flare up from conflicts in that area, and we need to address this, and I hope that the current negotiations come to a head very soon.
Well, it's another first for me. First of all, I find out I'm agreeing with Reform UK, and now I'm agreeing with a Conservative. What's going on? Ceasefire now is absolutely imperative, along with the unconditional release of hostages on both sides. If we can sort out the issue at source, people won't be marching in the streets. But people do have the right to protest, even though I think the Conservative government would like to see us all just stay at home and not do anything. But ceasefire now, unconditional release of hostages, that is imperative.
John, it's another first for me, agreeing with mate. Absolutely, the root cause is the desperate need for a ceasefire, the unconditional release of hostages, and a long-term sustainable peace and a two-state solution. And John touched on it, the Conservatives have done absolutely everything to keep our streets free of protests, and the right to protest is a fundamental right in our country. And I think they must continue, though of course there must be checks and balances, and I trust the Met Police to do just that.
You know, the terrible atrocities that we've seen in Gaza has just caused anguish around the world. It's a humanitarian catastrophe that's taking place. Thousands of men, women, children are being killed. And those horrific attacks on the 7th of October shocked the world, and we must absolutely condemn them. As the Liberal Democrats were the first party to call for an immediate bilateral ceasefire, and we must have lasting peace and a two-state solution. It's the only way that we can guarantee the dignity and the security by which both the Palestinians and the Israelis deserve. And we must ensure the security of Israelis and the future of Palestinians. Hamas cannot be allowed to be able to be in charge of Gaza.
I would imagine that the protests will go on for as long as the conflict is. I take your point about the fact that businesses are being harmed. If this is difficult, I mean, if the protest is peaceful, then I'm a big believer in freedom of speech, including freedom to protest. In Glastonbury, almost every day there's a peaceful protest there. If it isn't peaceful and they're calling for it's a hate march, then that's a different matter, and the police would have to intervene. But otherwise, I believe freedom of speech includes freedom of being able to protest peacefully.
So now we move to the closing phase of this evening, which is a short closing statement by each of the candidates in an order drawn by lot. They're going to have 1 minute each, and we begin with Faye Purbrick for the Conservative Party.
So I'd like to thank you all for your questions this evening. It's been great to be able to have a conversation about what people care about in this area. And what I care about is making sure you get the best possible representation as your MP. We hear a lot of talk about change, but change for change's sake is not good. We need progress. And there is a plan at the moment that is working to deliver some of that progress. There is a long way to go. I know everything isn't perfect, but I know that I have the skills to represent what we need in this area and deliver and move us forward. Security has got to be the first role of government. Food security, energy security, national security. Those are things you can trust me with as your Conservative MP. I've got the skills and experience from my time both as a councillor and working all over the world, and I want to deliver for the people of Glastonbury and Somerton, and of course Bruton. And if you give me your vote, then you will have somebody who will be standing up for exactly what you are asking for. Thank you.
Sat down for too long. Time for change. After 70 years, we're now in a position where we've got the highest tax, public spending, debt, waiting lists. Reform for me, aside from being left wing, right wing, whatever those things mean, I'm just looking for practical, common sense solutions to find a way forward. And wherever we are now in terms of Brexit or the last 14 years of government, I just want to move forward. Now, I think back to my grandfather who flew bombers in the Second World War. He was one of the few pilots to go all the way through. My father was a colonel in the army who worked in bomb disposal, and I think to myself, is this the country that they've risked their lives for? I'm sure we can all think back to the older generation that risked their lives and fought for this country, and I feel now it's our turn to stand and fight. Don't believe the idea that only two parties can run this country. Don't believe the idea that there's no point in trying. We are the people of Britain. The power lies with us. Join me now and help reform this country and make Britain great.
Survived that assault course again. I think I probably learnt that mill on the brew. Tonight, we've all been reminded of the chaos and incompetence that has characterised this Tory government. You've lived this chaos. Since 2016, we've had 13 different housing ministers, 9 education secretaries, 8 home secretaries, 7 chancellors, 7 foreign secretaries, 7 health secretaries, and 5 prime ministers. Partygate, the disastrous mini-budget, and crony contracts for their mates. Now, we have a chance for change on July the 4th. If you want to be part of a new dawn of a Labour government, then vote Labour. If you want to reject these failed 14 years of Conservative and Liberal Democrat governments, then vote Labour. If you want to do the unprecedented locally with the Tories collapsing, then vote Labour. And if you want a local MP at the heart of government with a seat at the table, then vote Labour.
Thank you very much. It's been a really interesting hustings. Everywhere I go in Somerset, I see a sign. It says, Lib Dems winning here. And I dare say that's true. But I also hear people saying, I would vote Green, but I'm going to vote tactically to keep the Tories out. Well, those two things don't add up in my mind. The Tories are toast, ladies and gentlemen. They are not going to win here. So you don't need to vote tactically to get rid of them. You can vote Green. You can vote with your heart. People who vote Reform, they always vote Reform. They never think about tactically voting. They push a right agenda that then gets insidiously into our politics. Well, now's your time to push a green agenda. So please consider voting Green, and please push that green agenda for our children, our grandchildren, and future generations. Thank you very much.
I'm going to quickly disagree with John because there has been no more important time to make sure that you put a tactical vote to get these Conservatives out. And here in Glastonbury and Somerton, it is a vote for the Liberal Democrats that is going to be able to do that. Because the Conservatives have promised to recruit 6,000 GPs and they haven't. They've promised to build 40 new hospitals and they haven't. 700 pharmacies have closed since 2015. And finding an NHS dentist is like trying to find hen's teeth. The Conservatives have allowed the NHS to crumble, they've crashed the economy, and they've left our rivers full of stinking sewage. This election is our chance to win the change our country so desperately needs. A vote for me is a vote to elect a strong and passionate local champion who will fight tirelessly for our community. So on the 4th of July, you have a choice: more chaos with the Conservatives or real change and a fair deal for all. And an MP that you can be proud of, who will put you first and give you the proper representation in Parliament that you deserve.
Ladies and gentlemen, that brings this evening to a close. Can I, on your behalf, I'll give you the chance to applaud in a moment, but can I, on your behalf, thank very much all of our 5 candidates for standing, for coming here this evening to answer questions, to tell us a little bit about who they are, to try and persuade you to vote for them. We're very grateful indeed, and it's a healthy sign that we can have a good, robust discussion in a polite and calm way, tackling difficult subjects about which there's much disagreement. And what a good thing it is that we settle that disagreement by casting a vote at the ballot box. So on behalf of us all, can we give them, please, a big round of applause?
And for our chair, ladies and gentlemen.
And our prayers clearly worked. It has stopped raining, so you won't get too wet on the way home. Can I thank you all for coming? I apologise to those of you who wanted to ask a question and I didn't select you, whether that was in writing or orally, but you can appreciate we couldn't allow all the questions or we'd be here beyond the 4th of July. But thank you all so much for coming, for the tone in which it was conducted, for your contribution to what was really a good evening. 2 tiny practical points. We found a pair of glasses on Church Bridge. Very handsome, very fetching, sort of tortoiseshell, slightly tinted glasses. If they belong to you, please come and see me later. And secondly, could you please do me the great favour, as you leave, of putting the tapestry cushion that you are sitting on or near back on the pew. You'd be amazed how long it takes to go around the whole church and put them all back after everyone's gone. So if you could do that as you leave, I'd be very grateful. And thanks to those on the technical side who kept it running so smoothly.
Thank you.